Hey, welcome to this week's study guide for April the 25th, the fourth Sunday in April. We had a great time talking about the resurrection. Today, I believe, coming out of COVID and with all that goes on in life, there are just some scriptures that mean a lot to us. There are actually scriptures that also have inspired hymns or songs that mean a lot to us. And this week's scripture and this week's message flows from one of those passages. It's Lamentations chapter 3, verse 22. So without any further ado, let's read that together. Because of the Lord's great love, we are not consumed, for his compassions never fail. They are new every morning. Great is your faithfulness. I say to myself, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. The Lord is good to those whose hope is in him, to the one who seeks him. It is good to wait quietly for the salvation of the Lord. Maybe you never realized that great is thy faithfulness is drawn from this passage. And it's interesting that this passage flows from a book called Lamentations. Now, that's not a word that we use all the time, but that's basically mourning, groaning, weeping. And so there are times in life, and certainly times in Israel's life, that we go through those. In Israel's case, it was brought upon by their own sin, but that's not always the case. Sometimes we just go through difficult things. Like, for instance, none of us are responsible for the fact that COVID came into our nation, or the downturn in the economy, or all the struggles that happen with that. Nonetheless, we are thankful for verses like this and hymns like Great is Thy Faithfulness that remind us of the things that we need to know in order to be able to get through difficult times. And so, without any further ado, let's talk about this passage and ask ourselves our first question today. Number one, in verse 22 and 23, three attributes of God's love are listed. What are they, and what do they mean to you? Again, what are those three attributes? And just talk about what they mean to you. And so we see that God's love is great, his compassion never fails, and they're new every morning. This idea of newness every morning is interesting, isn't it? That God's compassion, his love for us is fresh. Every day, newness, freshness. And so just again, pause and ask yourself the question, what does it mean to you? Maybe ask yourself the question, what did it mean to the one who wrote this, that God's compassions are new every morning? Isn't it awesome to know that God never gets worn out with you? Isn't it awesome to know that he never gets exhausted with your problems, that every morning, every day, his mercies, his compassion, his love for you is fresh. It's always like the first time you saw that beautiful girl or that wonderful guy, the first time you ever held that beautiful baby. You never get tired of that. That's how God feels about you. How awesome is that? Now we're going to go on to the next question. If you look with me at verse 24, you're going to find out that the writer of Lamentations is talking to himself here. Listen to what he says again. I say to myself, quote, the Lord is my portion, therefore I will wait for him. Do you ever talk to yourself? Let's just pause and ask ourselves a question. Why is he talking to himself, number one? Why is he talking to himself? Sometimes we need to remind ourselves, which literally means we talk to ourselves. Do you, as we continue with that idea, he's reminding himself of God's faithfulness. He's also reminding himself that he needs to be patient, that he needs to have hope, that God is his portion, that he needs to be patient and patiently wait for God. Let me just ask you another question along that same lines. Do you ever need to talk to yourself and remind you of those things? Finally, we get to the last two verses, verses 25 and 26. And in that, there are some attributes that you and I must have. The writer talks about those who want to have these blessings, those who want to walk in this peace, those who want to experience the faithfulness of God. There are three attributes here that he lists that we need to have. I'd like for you to just pause and see if you can figure out what those are. Talk about what those attributes might look like in your life, and then most importantly, ask yourself the question, are those attributes showing up in my life? Well, we see then that those attributes are this. We need to have hope in God. Hope is a confident assurance of a good outcome. It's not blindly wishing. It is saying, I know that God's going to take care of this, that we have hope in the Lord. Secondly, that we need to be seeking him. That means in our reading, in our worship, in our prayer life, in our time of devotion, that we need to be seeking God, that we don't need to be looking for other things for answers, other things for peace, other things for hope, that we need to be looking to God. And so we need to have hope, we need to be seeking, and the final one is that we need to wait. Now that's not easy. Here it says to wait quietly or wait patiently. Some of us are not very good at that. We need to wait knowing that God's going to take care of us, knowing that things are going to work out in the end. It has been a long year, long 13, 14 months now. But we're coming out. God's getting us through to the other side, and we've learned that lesson again. That they that wait upon the Lord shall renew their strength. They will mount up with wings like eagles. They'll run and not grow weary. They'll walk and not faint. Wait patiently on the Lord. Thanks for joining us today as we've been talking about the great faithfulness of God. Blessings.